Okay, a few people have asked me for help on how to download just the MySQL Workbench, and so I'm adding this section to the front of the video after the fact. So to download the, just the MySQL Workbench, we need a browser, of course, and something simple. Query MySQL Workbench download. And okay, something that's important is to remember we're going to work with the community version, so you don't have to worry about licensing. Make sure that's selected. And then go to Workbench. And something I mentioned earlier, or later again in this video, is in order to install Workbench on a Windows operating system, you must have these two libraries installed. So the .NET framework and the redistribution, and the links seem to work. I'm not going to bother downloading or installing, but surprisingly, again, these links actually seem to work. So you'll have to install these if you haven't already. And then here we go down to the GA release of the Workbench. Now I would, you can go to the download page, but that takes you through the installer. And if you just want to install the Workbench, then a little bit simpler link from right here. So this link will take you to the installation management utility that MySQL provides, which is nice. Otherwise, you can just download the Workbench installer from this link here. Something you may not have missed the first time around, Oracle would love it if you would sign up for one of their accounts, and I see no reason why you shouldn't. But if you want to skip this Oracle web account, then you can just use this link to take you right to the download. And that downloads the MSI. And this is where we picked up, or we will pick up in the next section, installing the Workbench from the install application. Okay, this video is going to describe installing the MySQL Workbench and working with the Workbench and installing the Sakila demonstration DB database and data, which will be needed to execute or to work the 2, maybe 3 SQL assignments for the course. So the first thing you want to do, if you haven't already, is start the MySQL server. Now, I think we talked about in class, you really, if it's on your PC, especially if it's on a notebook, you don't want to leave the MySQL server running all the time. You don't want it to start automatically when your PC boots. The server uses quite a lot of memory. It will slow down the startup times on your PC, and it'll just generally runs in the background consuming processor cycles. So I always have it turned off by default, and when I need it, I'll turn it on. It's easy enough to do. When you install the server, you also should have installed the notifier, and so we can just click on that and start the server. Yes. Takes a sec. And there we go. Alright, so to install MySQL Workbench, you need to have downloaded the MSI from MySQL. Again, this is the community version. So just run that. And yes. And okay. Complete. Install. And takes a sec. And finish. And it starts by default. Okay, we'll pick this up in a second. Information to contact the SQL server. Now in this situation, both the server and Workbench are running on the same machine, so they're running on localhost. To create a connection, it's pretty straightforward. Plus, and give it a name. And the machine's host name address is localhost. Port number is default. I'm using the root account. Now again, using the root account is a terrible idea in a production environment. However, for dev, for our purposes, it'll be just fine and simpler. What you want to do maybe before saving the connection is to test if the connection parameters are correct and so on. So you can test the connection, give it the password, and save the password for next time. And so if everything's working, you'll get a successful dialog message and it's all good. So you can save it. And now you have a new connection. If you want to make changes, back here for a second. If you want to make changes, of course, you can select this dialog and go in and change information. I don't think you'll need to. Alright, so localhost. So here we are on the Workbench, and this is the schema. This one on the left hand side here, we have two tabs, one for server management and one to observe and manipulate the schemas or the databases that MySQL is maintaining. Let's do a quick look at the management. Open it up a little bit. Alright, so nothing you'll need to work the projects or assignments, but we'll go over it just a little bit. Server status gives us information about the server that this session is logged into, which of course is on my local PC. And just a few little pieces of information about the resources that the server is experiencing, the number of connections, the CPU utilization. I assume this is the CPU utilization of the underlying Windows. Some overview about the amount of network traffic, how efficient the keys are, meaning this has to do with whether your keys, your indexes are working correctly, or maybe you need to improve your indexing. And then information about the number of selects that the server is experiencing, buffer, and reads and writes has to do with performance. And nothing we really need to get into here. Back over on this side, there's a dashboard. So this was server status, but there's also kind of an interesting dashboard you can look at, and perhaps a little more detailed information. Performance reports can tell us information about again, this would be information that's useful if we're running the server in a production environment and we want to see if the server is running slow or if performance could be improved. And so there's information, reports really, available in this tab, performance reports. So let's click one. I really don't know what these are. So total memory use, total memory by event, so event type. Well, we'd have to research these, but anyway. Okay, so at this point, you should have the MySQL server running on your PC. You should have the Workbench installed and running and connected to the server. Now here we look at the schema tab and we see that there is no Sakila, a schema called Sakila, available. In fact, just to make the point, I do not think that you will see the employee or simple company either. Those are on my local PC. So, a little background. Sakila is a database and data which is provided by MySQL, and the domain of this database is video store rentals, such as Blockbuster. And if you installed MySQL and a Workbench and the data sets, you will have Sakila already installed. You see Sakila as a tree in this tab. We are going to go over uninstalling and reinstalling the schema for this reason. The Sakila database will be the target or used to answer the 2 or 3 SQL assignments for the course. In that assignment, you'll be given a written description of what the select statement should produce, and then you'll need to write the select statement. And in order to verify that your select is correct, the questions also include the number of rows or the size of the result set that your select should produce. If you have made changes to Sakila, your installation of Sakila, that resulted in adding or removing rows from tables, then your queries, although correctly written, will not produce the same number of rows, and you'll have no way of being certain that you have correctly written the queries. In that situation, you'll want to remove or drop the schema and reinstall back to the initial state. Again, you will have Sakila installed already if you freshly installed MySQL, but again, you may want to drop and reinstall the data for the projects. Where do you find Sakila? Well, the information or the content, the files that we'll be looking at in a moment, are found on e-learning. That was weird. There we go. Wasn't working. Logging into e-learning and 4347. So you'll have just a new tab, new folder on our course for Sakila material, and in it you'll find several documents, including the two we're interested in at the moment is the Sakila data and Sakila schema. So you need to download these, and well, maybe download all of these documents from eLearning onto your local PC. I've already done so, so we'll move on from there. So let's get to installing Sakila. So we'll go to Schema, and then we'll go to File, and open SQL script. And then this is where I've installed the Sakila eLearning, and I'm going to select, now there's two files. The schema file contains the SQL scripts that will create the tables and indexes and stored procedures that make up this database. And then the data file contains insert statements which will populate these tables with sample data that you'll be writing your queries against. So the first step is to first install the schema, and then you can install the data into the schema. So first, Select the schema, Sakila schema SQL file, and that'll open a new tab. And this is all of the SQL, the create tables, and the keys, and the foreign key constraints, and other. And so we have all of the create statements for the database. Now we want to run this, of course, the script, of course. So we do that from the workbench by first ensuring that we have nothing selected in the editor, nothing, and then we can use this toolbar, execute the selected portion or everything if there is no selection. That's why it's important, no selection. We'll run it, and then down here you see the result, and it runs very quickly, and there it goes, finished. And it says, I think you can count on it being 41, and oops, there's nothing here, no change, but we need to refresh. Here we go, and now we have the Sakila schema or database installed, and we can open that up and open up the tables, several tables, several views, store procedures, and functions. Let's examine. So we can select the schema, and then here we have an information button, if you will, on the tree. Open that up, and then here is more or less the same information, tables. But what we're interested in is observing right now is that although we have these tables installed, they currently do not have any rows. Why? Because we haven't inserted the data yet, which we'll do next. Notice there's a refresh button down here. We can refresh, but we're not seeing anything. All right, so the second, like I said, the second file we install is the data file. So edit, file, open script, and again the data. It takes a while to load. It's a fairly large number of records, so there's a large number of insert statements. And we'll wait for that to finish. And there it is, data. As I said, wow, over 46,000 rows in that, or lines in that file. So this will take a while to load. Same thing though, make sure nothing's selected, and execute, and it's running. And one thing we can do if you're interested, go to the management console and click on the dashboard, and we might see some activity here as the server is loading. So we see that records are being written to the log files, and disk reads and writes, and it won't run for very long, even though there was a lot of data. And I think we're finished. So go back to schema, and let's just do this. So now we open up tables again, and we refresh if we wish, and we can see now that the rows have been populated. How do we know if this is correct? Well, if you look on the slide provided, bring it over here, that on the installing and using MySQL slide, there was a screenshot that included the rows for each, or the number of rows for each table, and you can verify that against the actual rows in the table, and they should match. And they do. Okay, so I think that's it for this section. Well, let's do something before I leave this section. As I said before, if you if you've installed Sakila and made some changes to the database, you will want to drop and reload the schema, Sakila, before working the SQL assignments. Well, dropping the schema is very simple. Select the schema, right context menu, drop schema, and just drop now. And this is there's no going back from this. This is a non-undoable, but it is gone, and of course these are no longer valid. I'm just going to close them. And so now you can reload the schema as we went over just a few minutes ago. Okay, after installing the Sakila schema database, let's work through a few queries and execute them in the workbench, and I'll give you some idea on how to run a query, how to what you can expect when the query runs, how to check the number of rows that were returned, stuff you'll need to know to work the SQL assignments. So in the e-learning material was included a SQL file, SQL script, sample queries, and so we'll load that. And that one, open the script, we'll do that one, sample queries. So you'll see here we have 5 or so queries, selects, nothing like an update or insert. And at the end of each, there's a comment, SQL comment, and the number of rows to expect. And then in some cases, some information that verifies that the correct information was returned. So to execute a query, I'm just going to copy and paste from this one. You open an SQL file and you type your query in, but I'm just going to paste. And so now I have a SQL query, and if there was a error, let's say I misspelled from, then we'll flag it, or let's keep the case correct, rentals. So it doesn't flag that as an error, but when you go to execute it, this is kind of handy. You can execute the SQL statement that the cursor is currently in, and there's a shortcut for this as well. Anyway, run it. So here we have an error. Why? Because I renamed rental to rentals. Let's see what the message is. Oh, here we go. Error code, blah blah. Sakila.rentals doesn't exist. So then the name of the schema, not the name of the table. Well, no doubt, because we renamed that. So as you can see, it catches syntax errors pretty nicely. And then if the object you're working with doesn't exist, then it will flag that as an error down here in the output window, unknown column, datex. So if it works correctly, then it'll be green, and the query, and then the result set, the number of rows that were returned. Well, this is a select count, which we'll talk a little bit about, but really we're going to return one row with one integer, which is the count of rows which met this criteria. And so here is the result set right here. As I said, a count returns an integer, and that's what we see. Okay, so that's how now you can save this file, of course. I would recommend it, naturally. as you are working the SQL assignments. Okay, so let's go back to our sample query and we'll execute some of these. Now you can highlight as well and run the highlighted text if you wish. And again, it does the same query as before, as we copied and pasted there. So we get the same result back. And let's execute the next one. Okay, so it's a select rental ID from rental where the rental date is null. So you should see the relationship between the two. Here we said instead of returning the rental IDs, we wanted to return the number of rentals, number of rows in rentals that met this criteria. And we said, well, we saw it returned 183. Then if we actually are selecting a, well, one thing we could change, we're selecting a single column from that, from the rental table. And of course this is a rental ID, so what we're selecting are the identity or the IDs of rentals which have not been returned yet. Rental date is null is an indication that return date that is null is an indication that the rental has not been returned. So again, we're going to see down here, here's how we can verify. Down here we executed the query and returned 183 rows, which is I highlighted there. And then in the result set we have a table, if you will, of 183 rows of the rows in rental whose return date is null. If we want to see all of the columns, we could change it to that. So now we will select all of the columns for each row that meets this select criteria. And we run it. And again, 183 rows. But now the result set is all of the columns or all of the attributes of that table. Okay. And the other ones work pretty much the same. Select, run, and one row returned, and we're selecting star from rental. Oh, we're selecting a particular rental ID. I'm sure it's one of the rental IDs that was in this returned by this select. And so same size result set, but just one row in the result set because we are selecting a specific rental ID, a unique key from the rental table. And what else? Oh, here's an interesting one. Rental ID from rental where inventory ID, customer ID, and return is null. So we're looking for an inventory ID is a particular rental. Obviously an item in the inventory. A customer ID is a particular customer in our system and their rental date being null. And that returns one row because it's, well, no, it shouldn't. It could return multiple rows. It only returns one rows, but it could return multiple. And there we go, result set. Select first name, last name, email from customer. So this is going to return all of the first, last, and email for every customer in the system, and there must be 599 customers in that table. We could verify that, interestingly, by going to the information, tables, and customer, and then number of rows, 599. Run the query, select, blah, 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 run it. So here is all of our customers. Well, the three columns of our customers, and we returned 599 rows because that's the total number of rows in the customer table. And so what's this last one? Select distinct rental rates from film. So this is going to return a little bit advanced for us here at this point, but this is going to return all of the unique rental rates, which I believe is the daily amount that a rental cost, from the table film. So the table film must maintain the rental rates for that particular film, how much it costs to rent that film, and we run that. Well, I didn't want to highlight it, so we'll just run it like that. And 99, 499, 299. I guess a little discussion. So if you recall from well, even now with renting streaming videos, a first run movie, a brand new movie that's just been released to streaming is more expensive than a movie which has been released several years ago. I don't know. And then maybe the film is on special. It's an old film and they're promoting it. So it's a 99-cent rental. So that three categories of rental rates. Well, what this amounts to is that if we examine all of the rental rates in all the films, we find only three distinct values. We'll find films that rent for $4.99, films that rent for $2.99, $99, and none other. Okay, so that gave us some idea on how to use the workbench to execute queries, to examine the result sets that are returned, to check for errors during the execution of a query, if one exists. Again, the number of rows that are returned, and that's about it. So I hope you found this useful, and let me know if you have any questions.